Jazzcast Pros. Welcome to Elevating Enterprise, the podcast that gives you a 100,000-foot view of success and the elevator access to get there. My name is Jazzy T, host of Elevating Enterprise, along with my co-host and partner, RJ Williams. And today we are joined by a live studio audience at the Aligned Entrepreneur Podathon at WXXI Studio A. And today's topic, doing business with the government. Joining us is the Supplier Diversity Manager in Monroe County, Matthew Burrell. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Jazzy. Thanks, Ruben. Nice to be here.
What is the Supplier Diversity Program here in Monroe County?
Sure. Back in 2000, just after the election of Adam Bell, our county executive, the legislator thought it was important to put into law these things that people have asked for many years. And that was a minority women business enterprise program where they would be allowed to come and do work for the county, to set our goals of 12% and 3% in law, and actually create a certification program so it was easy for minority women businesses to become certified. Because to be considered a minority women business, you can't just say that's who I am. You have to have some kind of certification under most statutes and laws. So as opposed to having to go to New York State, at the time there was a very large backlog with New York State. The ledge said, what can we do to make it easier for MWBE firms in this area to be part of this process? So they created the program under what's called Gantz law. So now we have our own law. That was in 2020. In 2021, we started the program. And I'm happy to say since then, we've certified 855 firms in the Rochester area in the MWBE program. So it's growing by leaps and bounds.
And I am proud that Jazzcast Pros is one of the MWBE programs. And we have several here in the studio as well, even up here on the stage, MWBEs. And so, Ruben, do you want to expound a little bit more about, you do have a lot of experience doing government contracting and how that can be beneficial for a small or medium enterprise?
Well, first I'd like to start off and ask Matthew, how do firms qualify to be MWBE?
We'll talk about the county programs. That's what I'm most well versed in. But these rules really apply for most certification programs. The county has an online application, and what we're going to be looking at are a couple things. Really, holistically, the application is are who you say you are. Are you a minority firm? Are you a woman-owned firm? Do you control the business? Is it something that you own 51%? But your husband does all the work? To us, that's not a woman-owned business. Same if you're a minority and you have a non-minority partner and he has all the expertise or they have all the expertise and you don't. We're going to look at that and say, is that really a minority-owned business? Do you control? Yeah, on paper, 51% is great. But do you control? Are you the highest paid? Are you making that company move forward in your direction? So that's what we look at. There are some citizenship requirements, either to be a citizen or a permanent resident alien. There's nothing we can do to get around that. It's really baked into the law. And we really want you to have some experience. Because I'm telling you, working for the government, much like any other kind of business development, it's not easy. It takes time to develop those things that you need to do to be able to do that. So one thing I look at in our program is, have you done some type of work? Yes, you can be in business for 6 months and be a part of our program, but I'm also going to recommend, hey, if you've done no work or you're just a startup, maybe we wait, give some time. Because once you're on our certification list, our agencies, our departments, and our prime contractors are going to be looking to maybe use you to fill their contracting goals and needs.
So, let me follow up on that because that was very important. Is your experience or what do you actually have expertise in doing? Because there's a difference with doing the government contracting business and doing your business that serves the government.
Sure.
So I think what you're saying there is you have a better chance of success. For example, I come from the construction industry back in another state. And so I was a general manager there. It was easier for us to do our proposal because we were going in to do construction business, not just do business with the government, like you said, with a startup. So how does that play?
Yeah, one of the things we look at is what do you specifically do within your business? When I have a business that does 45 different things or many different things, we say, let's pare that down. In some ways, the state will pare that down by your certification because unless you've done that specific work, they won't give you credit for working in those industries. I want you to bring all your skills to us and use them as we need them, but let's pare that down. You can't be, somebody said earlier in another podcast, jack of all trades, master of none. I want you to be the best one or two or three things you can do as opposed to marginally working at 50 different things. So we'll help you guide and tune that. When you build your profile on our certification list, what do we want to highlight that you're ready to do right now, that you're really good at, that you could come into our ecosystem and work right away?
So can you take us through after they get certified?
Sure.
What happens then? Do they get on a vendor's list? Is it a...
We'll kind of answer this question with a lot of different things at once. Once you're certified, there's a second process, which is a form to fill out to be a vendor. And that gets you in our pay system. It gets you looked at in our departments. If there's a specialized need the county has, they'll send you direct bids. So that's the next step is really you become certified, which is through my office. Then you become a vendor. Again, it's a really short process from certification to being a vendor. And then the really work begins. Being certified as a minority woman, being a vendor for a certain municipality guarantees absolutely nothing. Then the work really starts. So what I tell companies to do is then you got to do your homework and your research. Within the county, who buys what you sell? The county makes it easy for you. We actually have a search tool online for free that you can search all county contracts and know, hey, they buy this, they buy this, they buy this. This is how they buy it. These are the time frames they buy it in. Because if you don't know that, you're going to be running around missing. If you're pursuing government contracting, every municipality buys, all the school districts buy, the state buys, the federal government buys. What you want to be able to do is have a chance to kind of collect those in one spot. And that's where something like a bid match would be very, very effective for that. And what a bid match is basically almost like AI. It's an algorithm that it scrubs, it takes what you do, what you tell the system that you do. It looks all these different services out there and kind of puts it into one email once a day to let you know, hey, these people are buying these things that I want to sell. You get the email, then you can decide to take actions or not. But going before that, I recommend learning about the agencies you want to sell to, the departments, what their needs are. So many times you might be in a situation where you're going to respond to what's called a request for proposal or RFP. And it's on the street. Oh, it's coming out. It came out. I've got 6 weeks to respond. You've already lost. And I'll tell you why. Because the other 5 people that are responding already know the agents that are going to buy this. So not that you can't win, but you may be behind the curve if you haven't done your research and started building relationships within the agency beforehand. And they'll allow you to do that. Build the relationships, know what we're buying. One of the first things I tell people when they're pursuing an RFP is try to get the information from the previous contract. What did they buy? And if you have that in your pipeline and as you're developing your business, a month or 6 months out, a year out before you think this contract's going to come due, you're talking to the agencies. You're like, hey, I'm seeing you're buying this. Is this contract working? Because you'd be surprised. They're not going to necessarily badmouth the incumbent, but they will give you information as far as, hey, yeah, we like this, but the contract says we really want this. So when you respond to that RFP, you can start writing effectively to what the true needs are. And if you've never done an RFP, there are some great agencies out there that will help walk you through it. And we'll talk about that here in a little bit.
I think you threw a lot out there.
I did, yeah. I turned the fire hose on.
You definitely did. So I want to kind of run it back and unpack some of this stuff
Absolutely.
too. So you dropped a percentage earlier. You said like 3%, and then you were talking about MWBEs.
Sure.
Can you explain that? Because there are people who are considering getting an MWBE. They might have heard it's really difficult. So, for instance, in New York State, it's a little bit of a more in-depth process.
It is.
You've made it very simple here in Monroe County. And I can tell you guys, I walked into Matthew's office with RJ, and before I got out of my chair, I was certified. He has made this process very streamlined, very simple, right? And so there are people in this room that have taken the time to get the certification, but they don't know what to do with it. Yeah. They don't know really what it's for.
Sure.
So when you talk about there's a certain percentage, can you explain what you mean by that?
I will, yeah. Sorry, I kind of brushed over that. In Monroe County, we have 3 different diversity goals that we are under. We have a 12% goal in all our contracts for minority businesses, 3% for women businesses, and then 6% for service-disabled veteran-owned businesses. So
what that means,
total of 21%. So if I have a contract for $100,000, prime contractors have to find to subcontract out that 21% to those designated types of businesses. The nice thing about that is if you're new to government contracting or you're new to business, maybe it's too much of a stretch to go for a $100,000 contract because you don't have the infrastructure behind that. But you could do that 12% really, really easily within that contract. So not only does it give you a chance to generate revenue, but it also gives you that initial entry into working with government and government contracts. If you've never been a part of government or government contracts, it's a lot different than working commercial business. We have different rules. People will call me when there's a requirement on the street and say, Matt, can you tell me about this? I can't. There's one person that can talk to you about the requirements. Well, what do you mean? I want to know what this does. You have to answer questions like everyone else because we have very strict rules for procurement. So again, homework early. I want you to be within this program. What helps is that every requirement when it comes back to us has what's called a utilization plan that outlines what that prime contractor is who they're going to use for that 12, 3, and 6%. If they're not meeting their numbers when they submit it, the first place I'm going, where do you think is the first place I'm going? Our list. I'm going to say, look, have you called these companies, and these companies to be part of that? Yeah. Because what we'll do is it's very punitive. Under our law, we have some teeth in our program. So if you're bidding on a project and you don't meet those goals, you could not get the work, even if you're the lowest bidder. Because part of it is we want a low bid, but we want you to be what's called responsive and responsible. And yes, we want a bid for that project, but we also want it the 12%, or 6%, or 3%. That's extremely important to us.
So, Matthew, how do you hold the prime accountable to that?
Well,
is it through the utilization
absolutely
plan?
Yeah, through our office, I'm not only am I Supplier Diversity Manager for the county, I'm also the MWBE officer. So I look at every utilization plan, and we track every utilization plan. If they said they're going to use companies A, B, and C, we make sure on a quarterly basis that they're hitting those numbers. For accountability, it starts during the initial bid process. We've had several times in the past couple of years where, again, that low bidder did not get the work because they simply could not make the utilization or refused to. And one contract was about $3.5 million that company did not get simply because they refused to work a part of our ecosystem. So we went to the second bidder. So that's the punitive action. Once you have a contract, it is possible for us to do liquid damages towards the prime contractor if they're making their goals. And then they have to deal with me. And if you've never dealt with me as far as your utilization plan, I'm kind of seem like jovial and nice. I'm not so nice, because it's extremely important. And the nice thing about our program is it's a law. It's not something we'd like to do. It's nice. We have law in the book saying if you don't do this, we can take these kind of actions. Now we don't threaten that, but it's part of our process, because we want you to have the best opportunity to be successful.
Yeah, I like to address when you said creating the relationships. Mm-hmm. Now, besides, I know there's always summits and these different things, but where I've been an officer in this before.
Sure.
So what I noticed back in the state that I'm from, and it was a successful program because we worked with the big three and the state and, same cast of characters, but we went further. We were part of a roundtable committee that we'd had the summit or the big event, but then we broke it down into smaller events.
Yeah, like any kind of business, building relationships is extremely important, especially in government contracting, especially if you're not ready to be the prime contractor, if you're not ready to be the signatory on the contract, if you want to be part of a team to do that. Part of my experience in my life was before I came back into government after retiring from the Air Force is I worked for a small minority veteran-owned firm out in Webster. Well, I mean small, about $30 million a year. My focus was business development for government contracting. I spent 90% of my time building relationships with either agencies or other companies or larger firms we wanted to work with. Whether there was an active requirement or not, that was my job. As a capture manager is to ensure that I built relationships. So that when something came up, we were the first company they thought of to meet A, B, C, or D that we could do for them. I can't tell you, just by having simple conversations like this, maybe not with TV cameras and lights, the things we were able to do, over a cup of coffee. Those in-person meetings, that personal touch matters at all levels of sales. Even in government, where it seems like, well, we're selling to this big brick building. You're not. You're selling to that person inside in their cubicle that wants to see, can you do it faster, easier, smarter, because I got to take care of my people. One thing I will tell you, working with the government, which is really anti what the typical stereotype is, government employees, people care. They care about what their job is, and they care about getting the work done. And every time I get a chance, I want to dispel that because people, the typical stereotype, hey, government workers, they're just there for a paycheck. It couldn't be farther from the truth. And when you're dealing with procurement professionals or people that are the buyers for these products and services, it's even more so. Because let's say construction, they might not approve of like an MWBE contractor if they have a history of past performance or bad past performance. Yeah. Because they got to make that road. They got to get that building up. For example, we have a minority firm now that stepped in with the current contract we have because the minority firm before them couldn't do the work. So they were replaced.
Can you give us some examples? Like you mentioned, like construction.
Yeah.
That's an obviously top of mind when you're doing government contracting, right?
Sure.
But for other people that are in the building here that might not be in the infrastructure space.
Yeah. No, let's talk about that.
Yeah, please. Let's get into
I'll tell you, now you're in my wheelhouse.
Yes, let's go.
There are very few things that are probably being sold by businesses in this room that the government in some part doesn't buy. Anybody know who the largest expenditure of money is in Monroe County? Who spends the most money? What department? Anybody realize that? Anybody know?
Building and grounds?
No. By far, it's Department of Human Services. In everything they do. Think of all the services that they provide. And think about how your business, your professional service business could fit within that. Perfect example, I have a company now, she called me, I talked to her yesterday, she's like, Matt, I'm working with a nonprofit, and they have a contract with the county, and they have goals to meet, and I clean their office building. And I clean some of their other, I'm like, well, absolutely that can be a part of it. I have other companies that are into mental health services. Probably a really big success was a company, I won't give out the name, that does massages for pregnant women. That's part of their business model. And they're part of a very large grant, and very specifically, they were put in this and fought for because they were a minority woman business, servicing an area that the other proposals weren't servicing. So we buy everything from pens, papers, services. For example, even things like health and beauty. We have people that go into the nursing home that the county runs to do hair. County employees don't do that, but they bring people in to offer that services. So again, there's a wide variety of things that we sell. It's not just about construction. And MWBE is not just about construction. Usually when you hear MWBE, it's like, oh, these are construction projects. And until 2020, the county was the same way. They didn't goal anything else. But now we goal everything, with the exception of commodities. So all our service contracts, there are goals on there. So you can reach out to me if you do something and you want to see if it's a fit for ecosystem. You reach out to me, or you can search the county contracts.
So the first thing you want to do is you want to get certified.
Correct.
If you are a minority or a woman, a small business. The second thing you want to do is get on the vendor list.
Correct.
Right? And so that's basically like letting the city and the county know how you want to get paid.
Yes.
Right? And that
correct.
you are available.
Correct.
And the next thing is to get on this bid match, which you did glance over that, but essentially you said it's AI, like an AI matching
it's really more
service.
like an algorithm. And I recommend, if you don't know where to go for these things, there's an agency in Monroe County that can help you from day one. They're called the Apex Accelerator. I'll be honest with you, I came from that community before I took over this role here, but I will tell you, they're there to help you full-time with your government contracting needs. And the best thing is, it's completely free service. It's paid for by the county. It's actually a Department of Defense program that's partially funded by Monroe County. So they have the resources there. They can get you set up on a bid match. Because I'm telling you, there are so many things out there. There are so many municipalities out there. There are so many different services out there. You want to bring that as easy as possible to do your research. When I was working for that private company, I had a $25,000 bid match service. You don't need that. We did. We were chasing big contracts. But what I would do is I would get the bid match in the morning and over coffee, and I look, okay, these might be of interest. Those go on. I condense that down to a few minutes because as an entrepreneur, you're very, very busy, especially if you're a single person business. By the way, to reiterate what I said earlier in the day, as soon as you can start piecing some of that out to other people and trusting people to do that, because if you don't, you're creating a ceiling for yourself, and it's not glass, it's plaster. You're not getting through it. If you're not willing to open up and trust people, I understand. And I've seen businesses that they're going to be this size forever, and they're great businesses. They do a great job of what they do. But they're not willing to take that next step and to give up some of those reins and that control.
Absolutely. So you just mentioned that there's other categories besides construction.
Yes.
And that's where an idea of a round table, I think some of the people would like that, to know that it's not just about construction and one-off. Sure. Could you hold sessions like that?
We can. We can definitely look into doing that. For those of you that may not know, in Buffalo, I'm part of an event that they're doing in Buffalo. It's an MWBE training day. And I'm actually teaching a workshop on non-construction related procurement and what is out there. On February 4th, Monroe County does our event. And that's something that we can maybe add to our agenda for that. So I think it's really important.
I think that's helpful, because a lot of people aren't in construction.
Yeah, and again,
and they need to know how they can participate.
It's hard in a half hour to talk about all the things that we do in the process. What I recommend is, if you want to hear more, you can reach out to me, or you can really your first step is the Apex Accelerators if you're looking at government contracting, because they are the premier experts to help walk you through that process. They can help walk you through the certification process, whether it be through the county, or through the state, or through federal level. There's different levels of certifications you can go after. Go to Apex Accelerators. If you're just starting a business, I recommend the Small Business Development Centers. There's one right here in Rochester. Apex they take you from, you've started a business, you want to do government contracting. The SBDCs can really start you from that base floor. I don't even have a business. What do I do? How do I get it started?
So I just wanted to wrap up with this. So now you're on the vendor, you got your bid match, and it's time to submit a request for proposal, aka a RFP.
Yes.
So what makes a winning proposal, and what are some of the don'ts that you've seen throughout the years, maybe common mistakes?
Well, I will tell you one mistake. I sat on a lot of source selections for the county, and there was a proposal that I read. It was for some services for the airport, and I thought it was a great proposal. I wasn't paying attention to the graphics till the airport director came in and said, "See this company? See that picture? It's not my airport. It was the Rochester, Minnesota airport."
Oh, no.
How quickly do you think that proposal went in the trash? Literally, the source selection committee didn't even look at it. Mm-hmm. Because if you don't know what airport you're applying to do business with, the RFP, many cases and most times will tell you exactly what they're looking for, exactly how to respond. Follow that. This is not the time to make this the most beautiful thing they've ever seen. If they want A, B, C, and D, give them that. If they if they have documents that you're supposed to send back, get them done. That's why when you're looking at responding to an RFP, make sure you have the time to do it. Yeah, it may look great, but the first thing you want to do is look at the requirements. Second thing you want to do is look at the selection criteria when you look at an RFP. One, can I do this type of work? Two, am I qualified? Because there may be things that you have to have or have already done beforehand. So a lot of it is use your village to do this. And by I mean go to Apex. I spent a lot of my time as an Apex counselor reviewing RFPs and helping companies. I can't write it for you, but I can definitely walk you through the process. That's a great tool for AI. I'm serious. There have been programs in the past that I've worked with where you can load the RFP and it will give you all the things that have to be done for that RFP. The difference between should and shall. You might not think it's a big difference, but in the contracting world, in the legal world, shall means no option. You have to. So, again, don't reach on RFPs. If your estimate of the work is $3 million and your largest contract is probably $150,000, you might be out of scope. You may not have the capacity to do that. But on the other side, if you see an RFP, maybe it's something that you really fit well. Maybe there's 10 things the government wants to buy, and you can do 2 or 3 really well. That's why you have these partners that you reach out to and say, hey, let's go after this together. One, it can spread the workload. 2, government loves when small businesses get together. We would much rather have 2 or 3 small businesses working on a project than somebody like an IBM, or Raytheon or RTX or Lockheed Martin. Why? Because small business is more flexible. You can change on a dime, where my son works for RTX, the big defense contractor. They change on a planet as opposed to changing on a dime. So read the requirements. Don't miss deadlines. Probably one of the most important things of that RFP process, and they'll allow you to do that, is the question and answer period. If you have questions, that's how they get answered. You send them into the representative. They get answered, then they publish them to everybody. Because what they don't want is one person to ask this great question to have an advantage. Everything about procurement is about being equal and having a level playing field. So other mistakes, cutting and pasting. I've seen that happen quite a bit where you have standard language use for an RFP, and then I'm reading it and it says, the city of Denver. I'm like, wait a minute, this isn't city of Denver. Yeah, it's easy to do that, but again, attention to detail. The federal side, they'll say it needs to be this font, these many pages, these many spaces in between lines. And I've dealt with some federal requirements where if it's 20 pages max and you submit 25, your last 5 pages get torn off and shredded, never considered. It could be the best part of your proposal or something key. So really it's about following the instructions. But before that, if you see an RFP and you don't know anything about the agency, if you don't know anything about their mission, consider waiting for the next time it comes out and doing the research beforehand. That's why I say it's so important to know who's buying what you're selling and when they may buy it. So you can start having conversations with the agencies before time. Because within 30 days of the RFP hitting the streets, it's a blackout period. But before then, you can talk to them.
All right. So the best way for people to reach out and connect with you to get involved with the Supplier Diversity Program here in Monroe County is? You
can go to just Google Monroe County MWBE, and you can find me there. I'm right in downtown Rochester in City Place, and I'm available. So we'd love to have you part of our program. We want to grow it bigger.
Well, you've been doing a phenomenal job.
I appreciate that.
For the past 5 years. You've helped a lot of people here in this room, and we'd just like to thank you for coming on Elevating Enterprise.
Thank you.
As we are putting together a coalition, check out Paychecks has an episode on Elevating Enterprise. Also, M&T Bank has an episode on Elevating Enterprise as well, talking about relationship banking. Any last words, RJ?
No, we'd like to thank Matthew for spending his time here on a Saturday.
Absolutely.
And sharing some very valuable information to our crowd here.
All right. And remember, Elevating Enterprise is the podcast that gives you 100,000-foot view of success so that you can grow and make the world a better place. Thank you so much for joining us today. So if this episode sparked new ideas for you, be sure to follow Elevating Enterprise and share it with someone ready to think bigger and move smarter, because success isn't overnight, it's strategic.